so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy. No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRNradio.
Are you ready to reach for the stars? Tune in to The Lost Wanderer, the #1 monthly podcast on good pods in astronomy. Join our host, Jeff, as he takes you on an interstellar adventure to explore the mysteries of space and the wonders of science. From rocket launches and distant galaxies to the latest discoveries in astronomy, each episode is a thrilling ride through the cosmos. Don't just gaze at the stars. Come explore the universe with us. Follow The Lost Wanderer wherever you get your podcasts, and let's discover the stars together.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
And welcome, everyone, to another episode of He Said, She Said. I am your co-host, Aggie. With me, as always, lately, is our awesome Rowdy Rick. How are you doing tonight?
Lately, she says 2.5 years later.
I know.
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm kind of digging the fact that I got to take a break from politics for a little bit of the afternoon. I finally started watching the new Daredevil series. No spoilers, but if you're a fan of the show, the first 10 minutes are gonna gut punch you. Just so you know, of the first episode. Just so you know. But I do like the fact that Disney's kind of given up on the whole. We're gonna try to whitewash Marvel and get rid of the dark side of it, because yeah, they kind of threw that right out the window. I have a feeling this may have something to do with a certain person no longer being soon to no longer be affiliated with one of the larger branches of the Disney franchise stuff lately. So I don't know. Gives me maybe some hope for the future. I'm an episode in, and there was nothing about any of the usual weirdness that Disney tries to throw in. So I was pleasantly surprised.
So I have no idea what's going on because I've pretty much tuned Disney out, but I'm assuming there was a fallout with an actor.
Well, no. So, you remember the South Park episode "Heard Around the World"? Ma'am,
Yes.
Ma'am, can you check to see if Kathleen Kennedy's under my bed? You remember that one? Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Kathleen Kennedy has resigned. She's leaving.
Oh, I did not know that she did that.
I assumed with your other co-host you would have known this, so I apologize. Or I would have filled in.
Oh,
the blanks.
no. Brad and I don't normally talk movies. It's with Orty that he does that.
Well, yeah. Well, Brad I don't know. Maybe it's just me because Brad talks to me about just a little bit of everything. When we do talk, we don't
Yeah,
talk.
true. This is true.
But yeah, so I just figured you already knew. But yeah, she basically she's pulling a Trudeau. She's resigning at some point, and I don't remember when the exact date is, but she is planning on leaving. But I was honestly surprised to hear that they're bringing back Daredevil because that was their whole thing when they bought Marvel. They killed all of the darker stuff that Netflix had going for them, and they were like, "Yeah, we're done with that." And then they brought this one back, which was like the beginning of the dark side of Marvel for TV. And I'm like, this is the one you guys are bringing back. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I've only watched the first episode because I had a few minutes because it's not really hard for me to pick out 5 authors that I want to have over for dinner because I used to read all the time and I have a lot of favorites. So,
Well, that's interesting. I guess I'll have to I don't know, tune in more often to what's going on in the in the Marvel and the Star Wars and the all of those worlds because I've tuned them all out completely after Disney gets its hands on late as of the past 10 years when Disney gets its hands on something they just immediately break it. So it's been disheartening.
Disney has become the place good content goes to die.
Yeah.
And I think
or where good content is willfully killed off,
yeah. Speaking of which, this may in fact be the latest entry in Doctor Who with Matumba Batgabwe or whatever the hell his name is. Yeah, apparently they have canceled the upcoming Christmas special. So this may be the end of Doctor Who again for a while.
Did they say why they canceled it?
I found an article on it, but it was behind a paywall. So now I'm gonna look at some point this weekend and see what I can figure out. But I have a feeling it has to do with they went wokeified with I don't know why I can't think of her name right now because I actually
the chick. Yeah, whatever.
I actually like the actress. I just her writers were terrible. And then they came up with bisexual. I want to stick my penis in everything, doctor. So that hasn't gone well either.
And he's stealing Captain Jack's shtick, and that's what I didn't like about it. Well, and I'm like, no, that's not your shtick. That's
not Captain Jack's shtick. Just
whatever. But you know what I mean. It should not have been something that was even in Doctor Who. Doctor Who was,
I'm just saying it rhymes with shtick. I think you missed the joke.
Yes.
Because he's all over Captain Jack's jock. If you get my meaning.
Oh man, he was so cute. Okay. Dude. Anyway.
Yeah, I didn't know all of the behind the scenes stuff going on there. Apparently he got caught up in the whole Me Too thing and was just kind of nuked over it.
Really?
Yep, that's one of the reasons why they eventually killed Torchwood, and then the guy who created it was going to try to bring it back with a different character, and then his partner got sick, and it just kind of they did some book on tape kind of things, and then it just went away. But yeah, apparently there was like this, but that's part of it though. And I get people don't understand this. The reason I don't have as big of an issue with it is because I had a bunch of friends in high school that were in drama and stuff. That is like an entirely different world, man. They will just do some randomly weird shit and think it's hilarious. But then normal people see them doing, they're like, "You're fucking nuts." Like, did I ever tell you the story about Catherine Bach and James Best?
No.
She was nervous as hell the first day of shooting. So, no joke, he came over and basically took his hat off, and inside his hat was a picture of him in nothing but the boots. Nothing but the boots.
I'm sorry?
Nothing but the boots and the hat. And she just started dying laughing. And after that, they were just able to just get through the day, and she wasn't even nervous anymore. And in an interview, I think it was decades later, she's like, "Yeah, that man had nothing to be ashamed of. Absolutely nothing."
Wow.
But it's just, when you're part of the culture, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not, you're like, what the fuck?
I know.
And I mean, I'm not saying things there haven't gone too far. Like the kids that have committed suicide over some of the shit that they've been put through, things like that, that's completely different. But when it's adults just being fucking stupid, I think we have blown some things way the hell out of proportion because it's just different when you grow up in that kind of a world. I'm not necessarily saying that it's okay, but I also think that we've made a huge deal out of some things that weren't necessarily as big of a deal as they've been made into be. But I'm not. I don't know. I don't live in Hollywood, and I know lots of people who think I'm nuts because they're convinced that every bit of Hollywood is possessed by the devil. So I don't know, but yeah, I
There's quite a few people who are, but not all of them.
but
You know,
yeah,
some people willingly go into the lion's den. You know, so
but yeah, I just always thought that was funny when I heard about that in an interview. Like, because I mean, I never really saw James Best in anything else, so every time I see him, all I ever think of is Roscoe, and I'm thinking of that character doing something like that, and I'm like, that is so anachronistic of anything that I would have ever thought that the character would have
I
done.
it's funny because growing up, I saw him in a lot of westerns that were dubbed in Spanish, and when I came here, it was 76 or so, and after I learned English and everything, Dukes of Hazzard came along, and there he was, and I recognized him. And I said, "I know that dude. I know that dude. I know that dude." And I just could not place him, but I distinctly remember him wearing similar hats. So as I grew older, I went back to watching westerns and everything, and every so often, he was there, and usually he was more of a character actor than anything. But he also did a lot of Twilight Zone episodes, and I was just there was one Twilight Zone episode, I think it was called Jess Bell, and about the gal who sells her soul, and becomes a witch because she's in love with this guy, and it was portrayed by James and Best, and I'm like, damn, he was pretty good looking when he was younger. So, um, but and apparently he had quite a following even after in his older years, because there were I think I got to meet both John Schneider and Tom Wolpett, and I remember John Schneider was in Puerto Rico, and he was actually doing an interview there while he was on his way to the Virgin Islands for his honeymoon. And so we got to, watch it, and he, he said that I'm not the biggest sex symbol on the show. And there was a translator and everything. And he actually mentioned that James Best was up there with him as a sex symbol. And I'm like, no way. Because I was young then. Now in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I can see it.
Or translation, Aggie's turned into a thirsty old woman. Just
Listen, there's nothing wrong with that.
I didn't say there was. I'm just saying there's two sides to every story.
True. So anyway, well, tonight we're going to have another episode of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I think we should have that at least once a month. It would be kind of fun to do thematically.
Oh yeah.
And this tonight's theme is writers, and living or dead is fine. It was hard for me to narrow this down.
Oh, I have a list of like 50, so don't feel bad. No, I'm not giving everybody all 50, but I before I started doing this full time and before I started raising kids and everything else, dude, I would read all the time, like everything, anything I could find, I would read. It didn't matter if it was a book about history, it could be politics, it could science fiction, magic stuff, horror. I mean, I was a voracious reader. Now that I've gotten older and I'm constantly looking at screens all the time, I'm like, I just don't even. I mean, I do still read books. I usually try to read at least a couple a month still, but I used to read like 5 a week. I'm not even kidding. I was one of those people that I would have 5 different books going at once and get bored with one, put it down, pick up the other one, pick up where I left off with that one, and yeah, finish like 5 of them all at the same time, usually within about a week, week and a half.
I used to have a paperback on almost every surface throughout the house. It would drive my family crazy. My mom would scream at me because there would be 3 paperbacks in the living room and 3 in the den, one on the nice dining room table, one in the breakfast table, and then I'd have like 4 or 5 in my room, and there was always some in the bathroom because when I took a bath, I would read in my bubble bath. And so when mom would be cleaning, she would like scream at me to get the books out of, and she finally gave up and she finally found a basket where I could just put them all in one place. And believe it or not, that basket is still at my parents' house in the den. And it still has paperbacks in it.
Oh, I
She
believe
has, I know. And it was funny because, every so often she just purchased stuff that if nobody's reading it, if nobody's using it, if you're not wearing it, it goes. I literally had to run down to my parents one weekend because she was like, if you don't come pick up your I think it was my prom dress or something. If you don't come pick up your prom dress, I'm just tossing it out. And I'm like, you can't toss out my prom dress. That's my prom dress. She's like, it's my house. You gotta come pick up your shit. And I mean, I think she just wanted to see me for the weekend. And so she just threatened me and got me down there. So, she managed to get what she wanted. But she had my prom dress. And what I did not know is that my mom had it dry cleaned. And I was like, so you weren't going to throw it out? And she said, oh, I was going to throw it out, but I dry cleaned it just in case. I'm serious. That's the way my mom thinks. I mean, she's like, well, she might come, so let me dry clean it. But if she doesn't come, I'm tossing it out. I don't care.
I'd have been like, I would have waited to see if you were coming first, been like, okay, before you take it back, I'm going to dry clean it.
She was, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's just our Hispanicity, it's just the way we are. But I went down there and it wasn't just my dress. There were some books. There was my atlas from my anthropology class. There was, there were a bunch of stuff that she had boxed up, but she used the prom dress to get me down there to come pick up my stuff. And, but every so often, she'll purge or whatever, but that basket still has the paperbacks that I left at home before I went to college. Y'all, I graduated from college in 1989, not 1889, but 1989.
I was a freshman in high school.
I have to make sure.
No, sorry. I was a sophomore in high school.
Oh my God. Okay, fine. But anyway, that basket is still there. And you know what I did when I went to visit and everything? I picked one up and I started reading it. And my mom was so happy to see me doing that. But it was that was my habit.
As soon as you saw her being happy, you should have made a point to go in there at some point and leave it on the fancy table again.
I almost did.
All right. So before we get into the topic, couple of quick things. First, this falls under the if I had to see it, you have to see it category because now I officially feel even older than I am. So apparently they've already put a Discman with anti-skip in a museum already.
Yes.
So now I feel older.
They actually have. I saw one at the Smithsonian, but it was part of an exhibit on the development of the whole thing, starting with the wax cylinders that they would use for voice stuff, and all the way up to, they even had a Zune. Okay, they had a Zune on display. I think Zunes lasted like 3 months or something, but they had one. They had the iPod. They had the Nano. They had all of those things, and so it was kind of like a, you know, look how far we've come. And it took me aback because I was like, my parents still have the cabinet with the stereo in it.
My dad did too until recently. So Al,
I just bought one. I just got one. It was $30 in an estate sale. I said, I need that in my life. And it
nice.
worked, and it was great.
So Al, I miss Walkman days. I was skinny back then and actually used to like to jog. So I have fond memories of Walkman. Then I got to the point where it was, if I'm running, it's because I'm chasing you, and you better not make me chase you.
Now, Al, my brother still has a cassette Walkman. He still has one, and it still works. He doesn't know what to do with it. I told him to give it to me. He's like, no, this is a relic, and I was really pissed off when he said that. But
And
I will complain later.
I'd have just rolled with it and been like, so am I. That's why I want it. Shut the fuck up and give it to me.
And in answer to M's question, no, I did not have to refinish it. The owner of that stereo cabinet kept it immaculate. It's in perfect condition. It had a little bit of scratches on the legs, but I took care of that. But I didn't need to refinish anything.
And they sold it for how much?
$30.
Wow.
I went on 75% off day, which
okay.
at $120, it was still a steal because a lot of people want these things. I'm not surprised that they do. They're, everything old is new again. Everybody's into the retro 1960s vibe, and I know I admit I'm one of them. But you go to the DFW area, and I have seen them being sold for as high as $4,000. And depending on the maker, the most popular maker I think is Magnavox. Philips also was a very popular brand of these things, and a lot of people just want them. They hearken to an era that everybody was more familiar with, and everything. So they're kind of cool and everything. And most of them, the first ones were really solid wood. Later on, they had that fake wood paneling stuff and plywood, but mine was solid maple, so I got lucky.
So this was not planned, but since you brought this up, this is the perfect tease. There may actually be another reason why more and more people are starting to be drawn from technology circa 80s and before. And Ordnance J. Packard and I are going to talk about that. Not this Saturday night, but next Saturday night on Juxtaposition when we do our annual Mandela Effect episode. Because I found
the Mandela Effect.
But yeah, so I found a new twist on it. So we're gonna do that. So yeah, that's interesting that came up. But I also have one recap from our last Guess Who's Coming to Dinner episode because Calvin was absolutely distraught that nobody picked Quick Change. I know that was the movie episode, not the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So, but I did finally make an excuse to watch Quick Change because I saw it was on Prime. I think I finally figured out why Quick Change never really seemed like it was very funny to me. That's basically my life. Anything that could possibly go wrong pretty much always does go wrong. So I don't find that humorous. I just find it as well as that's just pretty much how shit goes for me. I mean, I did enjoy the movie, but yeah, I was like, this isn't funny to me because this is pretty much how this would. If I was doing this would be everything that would have happened. So yeah. Now the interesting side note, because I did just have it on Prime. Prime, when the movie was over, picked the next one, and it came into something else that I had never seen before. A Fish Called Wanda. That movie was actually better than I expected it to be. And then, right before I finally decided it was time to go to sleep, the next one it rolled into was Get Shorty. I forgot how much I actually liked that movie.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. It was a good movie.
Yeah, I think my favorite part at the end was all the actors like leaving the set in a freaking Oldsmobile minivan because that's what he showed up in the beginning of the movie. He's like, I asked for a Cadillac. She's like, yeah, this is the Cadillac minivan, and do you want it or not? Because it's raining, and if not, you got to go all the way over there. It's like, fine. But yeah, no. So yeah, quick change. Yeah, decent movie. I actually had seen it before, but I didn't remember a lot of it. But yeah, if I had ever tried to rob a bank, that would have been my life story, not a movie. Just saying. 'Cause that would have everything that could have gone wrong in that movie did, and I'm like, "Yeah, this isn't funny to me because this is pretty much how I grew up." Just saying. Alright, but yeah, so alright, so who's your number 5? Because we've already burned almost 30 minutes.
My number 5, I have referred to her before on this show, um, is Isak Dinesen, also known as Karen Blixen, Baroness Karen von Blixen. She was a very gifted writer. She was a storyteller, which I like to differentiate from a writer because she could literally take one sentence and weave a tale from it, and had done so on many occasions. She's best known for her book Out of Africa, which was turned into a film and won Academy Awards for it, which detailed her life in Africa, running a coffee plantation. And also, the short story Babette's Feast was also turned into a film, and also an Academy Award winner. But one of the things that I've most enjoyed about her writing is that you can start reading and you feel like you were there. And that is to me the best quality of a storyteller. They actually weave a tale, and once you start reading, you feel like you've been immersed in it. And her story is just full of tragedy and loss, and yet she persevered and overcame that to actually write these beautiful stories and tales and novels. And for me, that shows a certain strength of will that is really lacking in a lot of humanity. It was, I mean, her life, it was like, I was reading a biography of her life, and I was like, this woman was like Job. Seriously. I mean, it was like every single bad thing would befall her, and she still would get up and she would still go forward. And she was a very humble person. She was very, she had no problem um, with not only bringing people up to her station, but also going down to their station, which, back then was very difficult for anybody that was nobility to do, much less a woman. So I would love to sit down and talk with her and ask her how it was that she managed to overcome so much adversity and so much pain and sadness in her life and still come out succeeding the way she did. It would be a tremendous conversation, and I'm sure that I would learn so much just from talking to her for 15 minutes, you know, because she had a lot. Not only did she say a lot in her tales, and that is one of the things that I love about reading her books, is that she is telling you a tale, but if you read closely, she's also giving you advice, and she's also teaching you things. And she does it in such a way that you're not even aware of it until months after you've read her works. And then something similar happens in your life, and you know how to approach it. And then the light goes on and says, "Oh, I see what she was trying to do." So she is a writer. She's not very popular nowadays, but I would rank her as one of the finest storytellers that I've ever read, and I highly recommend it. Even if you just want to read the tales of her life in Africa, Out of Africa is probably one of the best books that describes all of the situation, everything that was going on in Africa at the time, which not a lot of people wrote about because it wasn't very interesting to the nobility, and it really wasn't interesting to the people living in England or in Denmark or in, Sweden or anything like that. Most people just saw it as a faraway land, and it was exotic, and that was all they wanted to know about it. So it was for me, it and I read that book when I was attending college and getting my degree in anthropology, and it opened my eyes a lot to Africa. It was, for me, Africa as something to study was one thing. For me, Africa, something that you experienced by reading it, that was quite another. So it it complemented it very well. And it was I think one of the best things I found that year in all my reading was finding that book. And it was right after the movie came out. And I then I went to see the movie. And of course, the movie is fictionalized somewhat, but it's still, they got a lot from the book. And for me, that was very eye-opening. After that, I just started reading all of her things, and I was just I cannot tell you how often I would fall asleep reading her books and crying because they were so poignant, and they were beautifully written, and some were sad, but some were, there were good happy stories as well in her tales, and but still, I cry over everything, so take that with a grain of salt.
Why am I not surprised?
I know. It's just for me, most people remember the film and remember that you know, that it was played by Meryl Streep and Robert Redford was in it, and so was Klaus Maria Brandauer, and the very famous actors. And but then nobody actually recognizes that this person did live, this person did exist, and these were her experiences adapted for the screen. A lot of people, I was reading the book, and one of my friends, she lived in the same dorm, but on a different floor. She saw me reading the book one day, and she asked me, I was like, "Oh, is that a book about the movie?" And I said, "No, this is actually the book that the movie was based on." So it's the book about the movie. I said, "No, it's the book the movie was based on." And she's like, "I don't get it." I said, "This book was written a long time ago, and then somebody got the idea to make the movie out of it. That's what I mean." And she was like, "Oh, I see what you mean." And she asked me if it was anything like the film, and I said, "Did you like the movie?" And she said, "I loved it, but it was so sad, and there was, the love story was great, and this and that, but that ending just about killed me." And I told her, it's like, "Yeah, well, it's worse in the book." Because there was a lot more detail in the
It's always
book.
worse in the books.
There's always more detail. And she was like, "Oh my God, I don't think I can read this." A week later, she was asking to borrow the book. So she borrowed it, and then her roommate borrowed it, and then a girl down the hall from where she lived borrowed it. And that book actually traversed all four um, stories in that building. People were borrowing it. They borrowed it for an entire year before it came back to my room.
So what you're saying is this became the Fellowship of the Traveling Pages.
Yes, it was funny, but yeah. So how about you? What's your number 5?
Well, my number 5, kind of an obvious one, but still has to be, you know, and it was hard to put them in order, so I just kind of just started jotting them down. But of course, one of the people I would love to had to have to dinner and pick their brain would of course be William Shakespeare. That I mean, for those of you who may not know very much about him, he actually wrote a total of 37 plays. As far as we know, the exact number is actually debated because he was involved in a few collaborations. Some of his works include tragedies like Hamlet and Macbeth, comedies, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Some of you may have seen that remade in
I think
movies.
I've heard about this guy.
Yeah, he even wrote historical plays. Henry V, Richard III, Julius Caesar. Um, he wrote sonnets, total of 154 sonnets, uh, published in 1609, exploring love, beauty, time, and mortality. Apparently, he wasn't as well known for his sonnets because I didn't know that till I started doing some research a little bit earlier today. He's also written other poems, narrative poems like Venus and Adonis was written in 1593. The This one kind of surprised me. Apparently, this is also one of the things that helped him reach early fame. Was a poem that was written in 1594 entitled "The Rape of Lucretia."
Oh yeah.
Hmm. So he pioneered the use of iambic pentameter, invented over 1,700 words. Apparently, before Shakespeare, there was no such word as eyeball, and we didn't use the word lonely. Very interesting. So one of the reasons I would love to be able to pick his brain is because the man has left a legacy that has touched everyone. He's had works performed and studied worldwide. There were theaters built in his honor. The Globe Theater was built in 1599 and rebuilt in 1613. It became synonymous with his plays, so it's basically like become a shrine. It was a shrine to him for a time. His first recorded work was Henry VI, Part One. That was apparently between 1590 and 1592, and that was his emergence as a playwright. By 1599, he co-owned the Globe Theater, performed for Queen Elizabeth I and later King James I. In retirement, he returned to Stratford around 1613 after a prolific career, living as a wealthy gentleman until his death. The other thing that I find absolutely interesting, and I didn't learn this until English in college, apparently, when Shakespeare wrote about death, he was writing about something else. You're welcome.
I've always enjoyed his works. There were some more than others, obviously. Some are not like my thing. But I remember, you know, junior English in high school and my teacher telling us to pick a sonnet to memorize and of his, a sonnet by Shakespeare. And all of the girls wanted the same one.
Of course.
And I went way out of my way to get something that nobody else wanted.
So hang on. I want to make sure we're on the same page. The chick best known for figuring out ways to admire people's skulls went with something different. Are you sure? Is that possible? I'm not sure I believe you.
Yes, I did. You know, a lot of, most of the girls were going, shall I compare you to a summer's day or whatever. And I went,
A rose by any other. Oh, sorry.
I hate that I can't remember exactly the number, and I have since forgotten most of it, but it's the one where he's talking about how ugly his wife is and how much he loves her. And for me, that was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. And that was because he was talking about the hair stand like wires on her head, her cheeks, the bloom of her cheeks is gone. She's all wrinkled, blah, blah, blah. And he still loved her. And for me, that was awesome to read. It wasn't all of this, beautiful crap. It was real.
By the way, it's sonnet number 130.
Thank you.
I had it in my notes. I just had to go find it.
It was just, most people are like, why do you like that one? I'm like, what is not to like this? And I know he talks about her eyes not being like the sun. I remember the black wires grow on her head. No roses in her cheeks. Those things. And I'm like, I'm reading this going, he's describing me. This is awesome. This is the best thing I've ever read in my entire life. But, we all had to go up there and we had to recite it. And then we had to give a reason as to why we chose that poem, that sonnet, that particular sonnet, and why it struck a chord. And, when it was my turn, I was reciting it and everything. And God bless her, my teacher, Miss Hartwell, she did not like me because I did not see things her way. But she was still cool. And she looked at me and she said, I would not have thought that you would have picked that, because I see the trash that you read every day. Because I would always walk in there with a Harlequin romance book, okay? And she said that out loud to the class. And I was like deeply embarrassed. And then she asked me, why did you pick it? And I said, because that's reality. I'm like, everybody knows beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Thank you for, Shakespeare. And this is a way to understand what that phrase means. I got the highest grade in the class for that one thing because of the way I explained it. So shout out to my man, Will, who actually whipped it on beauty and everything.
Nice.
So yeah, I think William Shakespeare is a great choice. That is I think most people would have picked him. I didn't, simply because I don't know. I love his works, but I think I'd be intimidated.
Yeah, see, it's funny because I've actually had this discussion before, and Shakespeare is always one of the ones that makes it on my list. Not always in the same place, but he's almost always on my list. And I've had other people that have been like, "Yeah, I think I'd be too intimidated to have dinner with him." But these are some of the same people that used to freak out when like the number 3 in charge of our entire division in the university would just come and talk to me inside my cubicle like we were best buddies. I don't know, after being a boss, I don't really get intimidated by people anymore. So I'm like, dude, I have owned my own company now twice. You don't impress me. So I don't know. Maybe that's just something weird about me. But yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't be nervous, but I don't think I would be intimidated. I do get nervous around people still, but I don't really just like, oh my god, they intimidate me. Now in the same room with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, that might be a different story. But not somebody like Shakespeare.
I think you're right. There'd be a different type of intimidation. Like, I can understand the intimidation with Trump and Elon Musk. I think though, you wouldn't even last 20 seconds before that went away, because those two characters are real characters. They look at people like, equals. So I think you would be okay. But for me with Shakespeare, I'd be like, does this man eat? I mean, what does he eat? What is like, I'd be like, what do I feed him? That would be the intimidation. I mean, I am not going to go out and catch some pheasant and then pluck everything, bake it, and then put all the feathers back for this man to enjoy. That's not happening. So
just make him your duck. You'd be fine.
Maybe giving him duck might work. That might work.
I mean, can you imagine your family? Oh my God, you served your duck to William Shakespeare. I hate you.
Yeah, my sisters are still salty about that. Lord, that's never gonna go away. Okay.
Sorry, I had to cough. All right, so who's your number 4?
My number 4 is actually he actually passed away not too long ago. Well, by standards. But Tom Wolfe. I would love to host dinner for Tom Wolfe. And as you go on with the ones that I'm listing, there will be one common theme for all of the ones that I pick, and I dare anybody to pick it because it's very obscure, but I would love to host Tom Wolfe. He is one of the best known modern day writers. I think he started writing in the late 80s. His first book was Bonfire of the Vanities, which was made into a film with uh, Tom Hanks, who was still pretty young, and this kind of catapulted him into a more adult, serious movie roles for him. So that was it was kind of a big gateway for him. But Tom Wolfe was not just a writer; he was also a journalist. And one of the things that he loved to do best was the satirical darts he would throw at the elite society. He was so very good at that. He satirized the elites that lived in New York City, that lived in the Hamptons, that lived, in Connecticut, and in all of these highfalutin Massachusetts, the East Coast snobs, which is what I call them, growing up. But he satirized their entire lifestyle, and he basically, in one way, he would humanize them, but it wasn't a complimentary humanization of these people. For a long time, knowing, oh, you went to Harvard, oh, you went to Bryn Mawr, those kind of things kind of made me feel inferior to these people who got degrees in those particular schools. They went to the Seven Sisters, they went to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, whatever. And that was, for me, reading his stuff, to see them so exposed and so satirized. It kind of made me see how small these people really were, when it came to, I guess, uh, I don't, I can't describe it, but I guess being with other people in the community, or, getting outside their bubble, basically. And so for me, I would love to sit down with Tom Wolfe and ask him about that particular um, slice of society that most people, you still have the society pages, you still have socialites, you still have women. I see it's weird to me that I know that there are women out there that are social butterflies, that all they do, they're on the social pages. But I'm like, what do you do for a living? And I could never find out what they did for a living. And then, but they have money. And then how did you get the money? And it was kind of nebulous, this kind of thing, that kind of life has always been kind of weird to me. And I think it would be great to actually talk about that with Tom Wolfe as he breaks it down, and just excoriates that particular part of society, part of life that we have in here.
Well, so there are actually a couple of different Thomas Wolfe, so I wasn't exactly sure how far back you were going. But once I figured out the one that you were talking about, something occurred to me, because the guy that you're referring to, who recently died in 2018, actually
Mhm.
wrote a book that was one of my favorites, The Right
Let me
Stuff.
The right stuff. Uh-huh. Yeah, which was, kind of out of his, wheelhouse, because it was more of a biographical story that he was writing, as opposed to the satirical stories that he wrote prior to that. And I mean, it was a fantastic book. It became a fantastic film. Um, I think I still, Scott Glenn was still my favorite in that movie. And to the I Will Die on the Hill. I don't care. I know everybody likes Ed Harris, but I think Scott Glenn was the better of the two. But
Did it,
the thing was, if you read any of his um, older books, if you start with Bonfire of the Vanities, and from that, you go back when he was writing um, uh, his satire pieces for I think it was New Yorker or something like that. But you know, and the way he spoke about these people, and it was just incredible to me that he, living in that, could say that about these people, so that people outside of the bubble could understand how insulated these other people were. You know, they're not untouchable. He was telling us they're not untouchable. They have no concept of reality. And that's why he made fun of them. That's why he satirized them so well, because they could not understand true reality. I mean, he wasn't born in New York City. He died there, but he wasn't born there. And so for him, you know, it was a world that was ripe for the picking. So I think he would be a fantastic person to talk about other people with.
Yeah. To spill the tea with is what you're saying.
Okay, so that's the hint. That's the hint.
Nice.
How about
Oh,
you? What's your number 4?
of course, my number 4 would have to be Tolkien.
Ah,
And the funny thing is, I didn't really even find Tolkien until later in life. Tolkien was a huge influence on my now deceased, who would be my former father-in-law if he was still alive. Um, so I didn't really get into Tolkien until one day we were discussing it, and he bought me the books for my birthday. And I swear I couldn't put them down until I was done. And this is after I'd watched the movies, which is kind of a thing for me. If I know there's a movie and there's a book, I actually prefer to watch the movies first. Not because it gives me the abridged version, but because if I've read the books first, I will see all of the things that they left out, and or all the character combinations they've had to do to make the plot work, and I was like, this doesn't work the way you thought. It drives me nuts. It's one of the biggest issues I have with Stephen King works that get turned into TV miniseries and movies is they do all this chopping and butchering, and I'm just like, this sucks. But yeah, Tolkien, big deal. Actually, Gracie, now that she's 5, we are probably going to start reading the books together this summer so she understands where her nickname came from. Because I call her the Hobbit. I have since the moment I saw her. Because she came out as a baby with a full, like, adult-looking head of hair, giant blue eyes, and snow white skin, and I'm like, "Dude, she literally looks like a hobbit." And that's been my nickname for her ever since, and my ex to this day, and it's funny because she actually said it recently at a family thing, you know, "One of these days, she's gonna hate you for that nickname." And Gracie looked at her and said, "No, I don't. I like it." But yeah, at some point she may. And if she ever gets mad at me about it, I'll probably stop calling her that. But I don't know. I mean, of course, so speaking of the namesake, the first book was 1937. Of course, it was The Hobbit. So a children's book inspired by tales he told his own children. And the Lord of the Rings trilogy was written from 1954 to 1955, which was more of an epic that grew from his lifelong passion for myth making. These works, set in Middle Earth, drew heavily on his expertise in Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic mythology, as well as his invented languages like Elvish, Quenya, and Sindarin. He also published the Silmarillion posthumously in 1977, edited by his son Christopher, which chronicles the deeper history of Middle Earth, along with numerous poems, essays, and shorter tales like the Farmer Giles of Ham. So, I mean, it's another person that is dramatically influenced not only history but culture, and he's again somebody that I always love to talk to. Not see we have a different angle. You want to spill tea with people. I want to get to know them. We are not the same. Just kidding.
now I'm glad you brought him up, because Calvin.
Oh, I know. He was on my list before Calvin said it, and I said, "Great! For once, he's not going to want to burn the place down."
I know.
Because everything he's ever said should be on the list hasn't been on the list yet.
I mean, yeah, okay. I was like, man, am I sweating? Is he on my list? Is he on my list? Well, in a way, he is on my list. So that's kind of funny that they were both on our list.
Oh yeah, no, Calvin. They actually did a decent job with the transition in this instances from paper to cellulose, but they don't normally. So yeah, I think that, and even my father-in-law, who was like a lifelong Tolkien fan, was like these movies were probably about as best as I could have expected for the transition from a print format to a spoken visual format. So yeah, I mean they did do a good job, and not every single movie that's ever been made from a book into a movie sucks. It's just sometimes they get in a hurry, or they just decide they're going to try to put it out just to try to make money off of it. Or Stephen King takes 20 years to write the final book of a series and nobody knows what to do with it anymore. So they create Dark Tower, the movie that's trash. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? My
No, you didn't have to say it out loud. It's all true. We all know it.
bad.
Okay, so
Also,
is it?
what you got? What else you got? Your turn.
Oh, so my number three is another rather contemporary writer. He died way too young, in my opinion, but considering the life he led, I was not surprised when news came out as to the manner of his death, but that would be Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh, good one. Good one.
The man is hard to describe. He was a just like Tom Wolfe, and he was a contemporary of Wolfe's, as a matter of fact. They pioneered in the new journalism, and he specifically gave birth and rise to the term of gonzo journalism, whereby the actual journalist is at the center of the story. Um, he had a very interesting life, and it wasn't until he passed away that I found out that he had been in the Air Force. And that made, when he committed suicide, it made news in San Antonio because he went through basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. From there, he was transferred to another base, I think up in Illinois, to learn electronics. And he just could not. I mean, I think he made airman for first class before it was encouraged that he leave with an honorable discharge. And that was, when they were talking about this, I remember they were talking about it at Lackland Air Force Base because a lot of famous people have actually served in the military, and so they keep, kind of not a hallway of pictures or anything like that, but they keep a certain record of who becomes famous after serving in the military. They move the record for when such time as the need arises to where they need an interview is needed and they need that record. They have easier access to get it. And this, obviously he was pretty famous. He was, I don't have the word to describe somebody like him, but the amount of stories that this man must have gone to death with, I can't even imagine. This is a man that actually embedded himself into Hell's Angels for years in order to write about Hell's Angels. And I'm just like, I can't even grasp the concept of putting my life in such a place to where, just for writing a book or something, But I mean, he had absolutely no problem with that. He did have a problem with alcohol and drugs, and you know, and he was a fervent advocate of the Second Amendment. He he truly was one of a kind when it came to his writing style. I'm sure everybody is familiar with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I think was the most profitable book that he ever wrote. It was obviously made into a film back in the late 80s, and it still holds up today. It's still a fantastic film. But the book itself was incredible in that, for somebody like me who was not exposed to y'all, I'm gonna be frank with y'all here. I've never even smelled marijuana. It sounds I went to college, but nope, never ran across anybody. I'm too much of a dweeb, too much of a geek. So I never did. But to read about that kind of a lifestyle for me was very eye-opening. And that's where most of my education into the drug trade and all that stuff came from, was his writings. He for a time wrote for I want to say San Francisco, either the San Francisco Gate or the Gazette, one of the two. And he would have a section for his writings, and that would be the only thing I would read. I wasn't reading the rest of the newspaper, but it was just amazing how he bucked the system every single time. Even when the system wanted to work with him, he still bucked it. And so I can only imagine the amount of stories that he would regale everybody at the table. And I just, honestly, I would be kind of afraid to serve the man food, but the bar would be open. So he'd be happy, But yeah, he definitely would be somebody that I would this man would not be spilling tea. This man would be spilling Everclear. Okay. Talking really hard stuff that most of us might not even be ready to know about other people. So this would be a fantastic dinner companion, in my opinion.
Seems like a good choice to me.
I think so. And like I said, I really never partook in any herbal refreshments or anything like that. So for me, this would be like a complete education.
This is the point. This is the point of the program where we learn exactly how square Aggie is.
I'm so square. It's not even
Straight-laced. Of course, you have to plead for a fifth, MD. You drank the rest of them.
All right. Okay, so who would be your number 2?
Wait, I haven't done my number 3.
Oh, yet. No, wait. That's right. Your number 3.
Yeah, this would be my number 3. I'm like, I have tabs for each one so I don't get lost, and now you're making me get lost anyway. Oh, all right. So again, not really in any particular order because I couldn't figure out a way to put them in order. But my next one is going to be more of a contemporary kind of thing, and that is going to be the author Timothy Zahn, who is a science fiction author. But a lot of people don't know he actually had a completely different career path. He was born September 1st, 1951 in Chicago, raised in Lombard, Illinois, where he developed an early interest in science fiction, attended Glenbard East High School in Lombard. He earned a bachelor's of science degree in physics from Michigan State University in 1973. Pursued graduate studies at the University of Illinois, earning a Master of Science in Physics in 1975. Began working towards a doctorate in physics, but left the program after his advisor's death, shifting focus to writing. So again, this guy was headed towards being like a Neil deGrasse Tyson that didn't suck. Just saying. It's kind of where
without the sucking.
Well, yeah. So, but instead, he started writing science fiction as a hobby in 1975 while he was in graduate school. Sold his first short story, Ernie, to an analog magazine in 1978. Left academia in 1980 to pursue writing full time, supported by his wife Anna, selling a total of 18 stories that year for $2,000. In 1980, making $2,000 off of stories was no small change. So I can kind of see why he got excited about it. So, of course, he's best known for the Star Wars trilogy, the Star Wars Dawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, The Last Command, and of course, those were starting in 1991, and that actually revitalized a lot of the interest in the Star Wars franchise. He won the 1984 Hugo Award for his novels, uh, for his novella, Cascade Point, a story exploring faster than light travel and alternate realities. Big surprise that a guy that was headed towards physics degrees would be writing about that kind of stuff. He
Yeah.
authored the Black Collar trilogy, focusing on guerrilla resistance against alien invaders. I honestly believe this may have been the influence of a couple of different made for TV series that came out several years later. One of which, Falling Skies. They don't give him any credit, but based on the little bit that I've read of that work, it reminds me a lot of Falling Skies. So I think that may have been, even if they didn't realize it at the time, I think that may have been a kind of an inspiration for it. He also created the Cobra series, which was 9 novels featuring enhanced soldiers in a galactic setting. Wrote 14 Star Wars expanded universe novels, including 13 featuring Grand Admiral Thrawn across both Legends and current canon continuities. Penned original series like the Conquering trilogy and the Dragonback series, the latter earning an ALA Best Book for Young Adults recognition. Published numerous short stories with collections like Cascade Point 1985 and Time Bomb, and several others that all came out in 1998. He's also won a total of 5 Dragon Awards. So yeah, he actually
Wow.
helped me get back into Star Wars. The Grand Admiral Thrawn books, those were amazing to me, and I was really pissed off when they finally decided they were gonna do the sequels instead of the prequels, and that was not what they went with because those would have been amazing. And then they had to fuck it up and go, let's do episode 4 again, but with a chick and a bigger version of the Death Star. Yeah, that'll be fun. Jeez.
Oh goodness.
Oh.
Hmm.
So
I'm sure that would be a very interesting dinner companion.
my inner nerd would have fun because a lot of people don't know this, but I am a bit of a science nerd. It was something that I kind of pushed into boxes with some of my career paths because, some of the things I decided to do with my life, they don't like nerds very much. So I started learning to hide it. And I had this conversation with somebody who's now with the network. I was doing college level stuff like in testing and aptitude by 6th grade. But when we started moving around, I started hiding it because I started being made fun of. So because all my friends knew me in school, so they didn't care. But when we moved in 6th grade, I started, I was the kid that all the teachers was like, "Oh, look, he's in 6th grade reading at like almost senior college level." And all the kids were like, "Yeah, we're gonna beat the shit out of you at recess." So luckily for me, we moved like 4 schools in 4 years. So by 7th grade, I had just started acting like an idiot because I got tired of getting chased around the school all the damn time. But yeah, so I think I would really enjoy a conversation with somebody like Zahn. I really do.
I I think that would be. I mean, I don't have any science fiction writers on my list, but I know quite a few that I would love to like have just sit and just listen. I wouldn't even have to ask questions. I just, hey, tell me about what you're writing, and I would just shut up after that. I would love to hear how the mental process, the way they develop the settings, in their books, how they extrapolate, everything. Because it's, you know, there's a difference between writing fiction and writing science fiction. And a lot of people think, well, it's like almost the same thing. No, not really. It's not. Otherwise, it'd be called just fiction too. But I always, I write short stories for myself and everything. And when I go into science fiction, I always have to pull myself back because I cannot think. I could, but I would have to like devote so much time to thinking about that world that it would turn into a novel. I can't just make it a little short story. You know what I mean? So I think it would be so cool to have like your favorite science fiction writers in a round table and just letting them talk about
Dude,
everything.
well, that would be absolutely amazing. It really would.
My mind would be blown. I'd be like the one serving all the cocktails and shit and listening. I wouldn't be at the table, mind you. It'd just be like eavesdropping. But
Yeah,
anyway.
you just be like, I'm just gonna go behind the bar and do my bar babe thing. Y'all keep talking. Y'all keep talking. Oh. All right. So just to get to one of the points brought up in the chat, because M brought up, and it's not a bad point, which is why I want to touch on it. He said Zahn must have slept through general relativity to write about faster than light travel. Not necessarily true. There are several different theories regarding faster than light travel that actually do allow for the inclusion of general relativity, including the ability of using wormholes to travel from point A to point B. Um, there's also there's also an Alacambri drive. There's tachyons that can supposedly, because they already travel faster than light. There's also the quantum entanglement theory. See, I told you I'm a nerd. Which basically proves that atoms, which make up all matter, exist in all places all at once. So if you figure out how to bridge those gaps, you can actually go from point A to point B in an instant rather than it taking forever. So there are several different ways to get around the GR theory when doing faster than light travel. So sorry, I got to bring out my inner nerd for a minute. Back to you, Abby.
All right. I guess number two.
Yep, we are at
Um, okay, so my number two, a contemporary of J.R.R. Tolkien, and that would be C.S. Lewis. I think I know that they were good friends and everything, and I would love to be a fly on a wall in any discussion they were having. I really would. But for me, C.S. Lewis opened my eyes to so many different things when it came to my faith. And it's, when I read his biography and found out that he had fallen from Christianity and became an avowed atheist for quite a long time, and to read how he came back to his faith and everything that got cemented in it. It was an incredible tale. It was amazing. All of the steps that were taken for him to go back full circle to find his Christianity. But one of my favorite books by him, and everybody, says the Scrooge's Eight Letters or the Chronicles of Narnia or Mere Christianity. For me, The Four Loves is one of the best books I have ever read. And it is a really good description of the different types of love that a human being can have for another. And it's, for me, there's a quote in it that has struck me, and I keep it in my phone, and every so often I'll bring it back out. And it's about love and how you should not keep it to yourself. And it tells you, yeah, you can put it away and so nothing bothers it. You can put it in a box and it'll stay there, but it will change because love needs to grow. And that's why you shouldn't keep love. You should give love, and that's how love grows, is by the act of giving it. And it took me a long time I think I've read this book like maybe 20 times in my life. But for me, every time there has been loss, I read that book. Every time that I feel a certain Faye about my life, I will read that book. If I feel like there's another shoe's about to drop, I will read that book. And there is a lot of comfort that comes from knowing that giving love freely is in itself a gift for your soul. It's, it's not just about the romantic love and the love you have for family and the love you have for God and the love you have for friends, that kind of thing. It's about how, even though those are different, all four loves are different, the path that you take when giving that love is the same. So I would love to have him at dinner to ask him questions, not just about that book, but also to ask him about the conversations that he had with Tolkien. And, ask him, the little things that, so how did he like his tea? And, just things of that nature, because there's so, I mean, yeah, you read a biography or an autobiography of either gentleman, and it tells you a lot of stuff, but it doesn't tell you the minutiae that I like like how many cups of coffee did you have in the morning? It's like, and how did you tie your tie? And things of that nature. Always, I always gravitate to those types of details, because they say a lot about a person, and believe it or not, they do. They just do. And at least for me. So I would actually be asking him about Tolkien. I'd be asking him about his second wife, Joy. I would ask him, because he did write one of another favorite book of mine, is Surprised by Joy. And his wife preceded him in death. She died of cancer. But also, the path that he took as a young child, having to leave Ireland and go to England, the loss of his mother, things of that nature, because those things shaped his path to Christianity, away from Christianity, and then back to Christianity. And that conversation for me would be so soul fulfilling, just to talk about something like that, So he's definitely, and the only reason he didn't make it to number one is because there's somebody else with even stronger tea out there for me. That's the only reason.
That's interesting.
How about you? Who would be your number two?
Well, before we get to that, I do want to bring up one point, because a lot of the chat are dropping some absolutely amazing author names, and I kind of want to point out why none of them have been on my list. Like Isaac Asimov for one, Ray Bradbury for another. It's not necessarily just about who I would want to have dinner with. It's about who I would want to have dinner with that I have read prolifically, but still never really have been able to feel like I've gleaned enough about who they are from their work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Bradbury, I've read almost everything he ever put out. Same thing with Asimov. Some of these folks are folks that I've read a lot of their stuff, but I still don't really know much about them themselves other than their career high points. And I would love to just, sit down and just talk to them. So while there are higher profile people that could have made the list, I also kind of wanted to make sure that I exposed people to maybe some folks that they didn't know as much about. Like my number two could have very easily been Tom Clancy, but I decided to go with somebody else in the same genre. And not everybody knows who he is, but his name's Dale Brown. He is. Sorry, I don't want to keep saying was, because he's still alive. He is a rather prolific American author and former U.S. Air Force captain, renowned for his aviation techno thriller novels. He was born in November 2nd, 1956, in none other place than Buffalo, New York. Brown has penned over 30 action adventure novels, with many achieving New York Times bestseller status. His works, deeply influenced by his military background as a navigator bombardier, blend fast-paced narratives with cutting-edge technology and realistic geopolitical scenarios. Often anticipating real-world events, his novels are published in 11 languages and have sold over 12 million copies worldwide, including audiobooks and some computer games. Brown's most iconic series, which is how I got into reading him, revolve around a character named Patrick McClanahan, a U.S. Air Force officer whose exploits span over 25 years across 24 books. The series kicked off with The Flight of the Old Dog in 1987. It became a runaway bestseller, and this was revolving around a modified B-52 bomber crew undertaking a daring mission against a Soviet laser weapon. Subsequent novels like Day of the Cheetah in 1989, Sky Masters in 1991, and The Tin Man in 1989 follow McClanahan through high-stakes serial conflicts, introducing advanced aircraft and futuristic weaponry. Later books, such as The Moscow Offensive in 2018, transitioned to McClanahan's son, Brad, leading the next generation in battles involving cybernetic combat robots and space-based threats. So, yeah, there's much more here, but we're down to like 9 minutes. But yeah, he's another one kind of in the same wheelhouse as Clancy, but one that I feel like I know less about. So and plus Air Force. A lot of my family's Air Force, so I always have to kind of be loyal to that. So
That's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to check out some of his books.
yeah, one other little quick point. He really does pay attention to detail. He's actually best known for the meticulous details in his books, drawn from his experience flying B-52s and FB-111s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I may have to send that to a friend of mine who likes to write military fiction short stories. She may know, may not, but I'll have to send her that info because that's almost like he's done the research for you.
Yeah, so yeah, here's your source material, bro.
Exactly.
Oh. But yeah, that was during. I mean, some of those books came out while I was still in high school, and I was like big into like flight simulators and pretty much any simulation game you could find. I was playing at the time. Tom Clancy's Hunt for Red October had been converted from book to movie, and also had become a video game. I was playing that, so I was reading those books. I was playing simulator games like Gunship, F-15 Strike Eagle, pretty much any flight sim you could find. I was playing it. So those books were right in my wheelhouse at the time, and I loved every minute of them because it was this weird thing. It was like an amalgamation between like Air Force kick-ass pilot and James Bond rolled into one.
Very cool. I mean, but it made it, I think, more realistic to have a James Bond, military guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love James Bond. I grew up with James Bond. My dad loved the books and everything. And of course, Ian Fleming, living in the Caribbean, he would go to Puerto Rico every so often and to the Virgin Islands as well. So he was pretty well known by some of my family members who, one of which was actually a writer and an historian. So that's how my dad was introduced to that and got into reading all the books and everything.
So yeah,
But yeah,
weird thing about James Bond, and I think we've talked about this before. But I was really, really freaked out one night because I couldn't sleep, and I had one of I think it was like AMC or Turner Classic Movies on, and there was a James Bond title coming up that I had never heard of before, and I'm like, well, this could be interesting. I thought I had seen all of these, and it was an older movie, so it was only about an hour and 15 minutes long. And it was set in the Casino Royale, but it wasn't the Casino Royale movie, and that's why I was so confused. I'm like, wait a minute, he's in Casino Royale. I've seen this movie. And then they cut to James Bond and Felix Leiter meeting for the first time. And I swear to God, I just about lost my mind because James Bond was an American CIA agent and Felix Leiter was the MI6 agent. And I was like, this is not right. What have you? And this was first. This was before all of the other movies. There was a movie released years before the first version of Casino Royale ever made it out in the theaters, and it had the characters reversed. James Bond was CIA and Leiter was MI6, and I was like, this is I swear it broke my brain for like 20 minutes.
That would be trippy to watch. Not gonna lie.
Dude, I swear it literally broke my brain. But yeah, no.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've hit that. I think we've hit that point. I think we're down to the number ones. I think. I'm
Yes,
keeping count.
we are. So my number one, and if anybody knows me at all, would understand why my number one is none other than Dame Agatha Christie. As y'all know, I'm a mystery maven. I will watch every mystery known to man. But one of the main reasons that I would love to actually have dinner with Agatha Christie is that I mean, this was a woman who married when she was relatively young, and it was not a very happy marriage. Even though she kept his name, she divorced at a rather young age, and during a time when divorce was severely frowned upon, even in the Anglican Church, which was founded because of divorce. But you know, back then it was kind of frowned upon, and she, wrote very well, amazing mystery novels. Some of her characters include Hercule Poirot. Um, Now I feel myself identifying with Miss Marple more often than not. She had characters such as Mr. Harley Quinn, Tuppence, and the Beresfords. You know, there were a lot of characters in her short stories, but most of her main books were about the little French Belgian detective and the little spinster that lived in St. Mary Mead. And she was, at the time when she started writing, she also wrote under pseudo, a nom de plume, Mary Westmacott, and she wrote romance novels. And a lot of people don't know or identify her with those, but that's kind of where she started getting, um, you know, expanding her writing abilities and everything. But one of the things that I would love to talk to this woman about, it's not just the fact that she was, um, you know, basically at the forefront of the suffrage movement for Great Britain. It's not that she was, one woman writing institution or anything like that. No, this chick disappeared for 11 days, and it was the biggest mystery of the time. No one knows where she was at. No one knows what happened to her. Her car was found somewhere almost off a cliff. Her clothes were in it. She just left for 11 days. Nobody knows. She was found at some hotel under another pseudonym. And until her dying day, she and her solicitor swore that she had had amnesia the whole time. And to this day, it's considered one of the biggest mysteries that ever happened. And of course, it happened to a mystery writer, which was even better. And for me, that has been like the biggest thing that I have got to know before I die. What happened? Where were you? What were you doing? Some people surmise that the depression that she was suffering over the deterioration of her marriage led her to actually have some sort of psychotic break. And she just, she was driving one day, stopped the car, and left. But nobody knows where she went off to. Nobody knows what happened during those 11 days. And they have made films about this. They've had short stories written about this. Somebody wrote a novel based just on those 11 days as to what could have happened to Agatha Christie. I think somebody actually made a sci-fi short story on that she was abducted by aliens or something to that effect. And it was supposed to be funny and everything. And it was really cute. But to be able to sit with her and actually talk about how she developed these characters, because these characters were just not what most people writing mysteries were using as main characters. I mean, Hercule Poirot, the description of him was just this dumpy little character who always had to be, he was a neat freak, he had to be perfect. He had a little egg-shaped head, he was bald, he had the most perfect mustache and the prettiest green eyes, and he was always talking about the little gray cells. That is not something that inspires, this romantic vision of someone who's out to solve a mystery, that kind of thing. And then there's Miss Marple, who was a spinster. She never left St. Mary Mead. Hell, she barely left her house for anything, and yet she was solving mysteries. And the way she solved mysteries is very similar to the way an anthropologist actually studies a culture. He just watches what goes on, and that's the way it used to be, not the way it is now, apparently. But that was the shtick that particular character had, and which is why I say I identify more with her every day, because I just sit here and I watch everything. And for me, it was like she was writing about these quirky characters back in a time when most mystery writers, everybody was dashing, everybody was, cloak and dagger, that kind of thing. And she brings these quirky characters and shoves them as the main person in the entire book. And we see these people as people, and it was really neat the way she brought that forward, and she revolutionized the way people wrote mysteries after that. So, but yeah, I just want to ask her where the hell she was for 11 days. I really want to know.
That's awesome. Where were you? Tell us the truth, damn it. Where were you?
All right, and how about you? What's your number one?
All right, so my number one is tied to the genre of mystery, so I started trying to figure out who to bring up with that. I mean, you've got James Patterson, Gillian Flynn, Dana French, Lisa Gardner. I mean, you can even go even further back to, folks like Agatha Christie. But the truth of it is, without one specific person, there would be no mystery genre. So, of course, it's my number one spot. Since we're talking about mystery, it has to go to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Because without him, there would be no mystery genre. He basically
This is
started.
true.
So I mean, so just to give you a little bit of an overview, I mean, I know a lot of you probably know a lot about Doyle, and he's not necessarily, he's one that I want to pick his brain, because for him to have created a character like Holmes that has lasted this long, I mean, you have to remember, Sherlock Holmes was created in 1887. They are still making contemporary TV shows about him as recently as a few years ago. The strength of characters like that is amazing to me. But the irony of that is, at one point, Doyle was so just done with Holmes and just pissed off because he'd written so many other things, and Holmes was the thing that took off, that he actually tried to kill him off, and they said no.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, they threw a fit. I mean, he wrote Sherlock Holmes stories basically ranging in dates from 1887 to 1927. But he also wrote other groups of works, such as the Professor Challenger series from 1912 to 1929. He also tried to dabble in some historical novels, including things like The White Company in 1891, Sir Nigel in 1906. He wrote several other short stories, but he had some interesting themes. And again, it's one of the reasons why I kind of want to pick his brain. So, rationality versus mystery. Holmes, of course, was his champion of logic, while Challenger and his spiritual writings explore the unknown. So he also wrote a lot about the Victorian era. Sorry, capturing the period's optimism, imperialism, and unease with vivid authenticity. Legacy, his influences, of course, pioneered the detective genre, inspired countless adaptations, films, TV shows, games, authors, including the aforementioned Agatha Christie. Popularity, Holmes remains a global phenomenon to this day. Doyle's non-Holmes works, while not as prolific, do enjoy niche and rapidly dedicated followers. Um, some argue that again he grew resentful of Holmes' dominance, reflected in attempts to kill him off in The Final Problem in 1893, before fan pressure basically said, "You do that, and we're done with you." And again, um, he's created something that has. I mean, think about it. The average generation is usually, and I've noticed lately, they seem to be shrinking them to about 16 years, but they used to be anywhere between 20 to 25 years. You do the math. We're talking about going back to like the 1860s, and this character is still around today. That and still very popular today. I mean, even has influences in modern television. One of Lieutenant Commander Data's favorite people inside of the Star Trek universe was the character of Sherlock Holmes. And it's just one of those things where, I mean, the dude was born in 1859 and he forever changed the face of the world, even if it was from a character or based on a character that he eventually grew to hate. That's just kind of insane to me. But that's it. That's my top 5 with some other folks thrown in that I know in some cases are actually more prolific or more well known than some of the ones that I chose. But that's because I honestly expected some of the more well knowns to be on your list. So I was like, I'm going to pick others because I know at least a couple of these are probably going to be on hers. For once, we didn't really have much overlap. I was kind of surprised.
Very cool. I think it's amazing to me that Doyle was. A lot of people don't know, but he was a doctor, and that his experiences in that field actually made him, in my opinion, a better mystery writer because he was concerned with pathology. He was actually one of the earliest pathologists, and so I always thought that was so complementary to his writing.
Well, you kind of brought up an interesting point. He would have been the real life Watson to Holmes if Holmes was a real person.
Yes, he would have been. I think it's kind of cool. But anyway, we have overextended our show.
That's all right. No,
nope? Okay.
It's supposed to be, but Katz has family. So I think we're gonna at least until we get probably back into the summer months, I think we're gonna take that one down to once a month because it always seems like he's got some stuff going on. So,
okay,
but that's fine with me because I work all the time anyway. So me getting to knock off anywhere between an hour and a half to 3 hours earlier than I expected, I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Well, okay, it was a fun show. Rick, where can we find you?
Oh, don't look for me; it's a trap. You can find me tomorrow night pushing buttons for the Front Porch Forensics crew starting at their new time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find me in November starting a revolution and creating rowdy time if they try to move the damn clocks back again, because those go forward this weekend. Then I'm not doing it again. I don't care. I'll create my own time zone if I have to. You can also find me, I think, Sunday night doing America Off the Rails, since you guys had to move to Monday for Spirited Books. So I'll probably do that one when Al's done at 10 Eastern. Because since the time's going forward again, I won't feel quite so out of sync. I swear to God, anytime there's a time change, do you guys remember Star Trek The Next Generation, like the very first time travel episode they tried to do on that one where Picard got thrown forward by a few hours and there was 2 versions of him and one was like just dead until it got closer and closer to that point in time. That's how I feel when time change happens. I just feel out of sync for that entire used to be 6 months, now it's closer to 4, so it's less than what it used to be, but it still drives me nuts, and I don't like it. And then Monday I will be off. Tuesday through Friday next week, again doing the Rick Robinson Show noon to 3. Don't forget to check out the new drive time show behind me, the Rush Hour Rebellion, hosted by Datahawk. And then Tuesday night we will be back over on the Manorama panel. And I think that's all I'm really saying for now because I'm kind of done. I have too many things to list, and it's already 9:10. But you can find me at KLRN Radio is where you can find the network. You can find me at Radovich73. You can find me as a contributor occasionally on places like Twitchy.com, MisfitsPolitics.com, TheLoftusParty.com, and I do produce their podcast, which drops on Tuesdays. If you haven't checked it out yet, he actually had Catcherd on this last Tuesday's episode. So that one's been a fun listen. That one was fun to put together. I think that's it. There was one other thing I was going to say, but my train of thought is officially derailed. So where can folks find you, the lovely Aggie?
You can find me at Aggie Weekend and at Aggie the Barkeep. Those are over on X. You can find me 8:30 p.m. Eastern Tuesday nights doing the Cocktail Lounge with the ever suave Brad Slager. 8:30 p.m. Eastern Friday nights doing He Said, She Said with the awesome Rowdy Rick. That would be you. The first Monday of every month, Jeff and I do Spirited Books at 8:30 p.m. Eastern as well. Y'all seeing a pattern here? Okay. And where we get together and we read books and match a cocktail to the book. But we couldn't do it last week, so we'll be doing it this coming Monday. So stay tuned for that. And the second Wednesday of every month, the guys get together at 8 p.m. Eastern for Toxic Masculinity, where we host a Babe of the Month, and I bring the drink of the evening. So thanks so much for joining us, y'all. It was a lot of fun getting to know new, what I would be asking an author at the dinner table. Bitch, where have you been?
I think M is trolling us in the chat.
Oh, I know. I know. It's coming this Sunday and I'm not prepared. Okay.
But yeah, no, for anybody who's wondering where the idea for Rowdy Time came from, you can blame Aggie for that one.
Yes. I'll take full responsibility.
But yeah, I pretty much decided since I work from home, I mean, I can still adjust when I need to, but I'm just going to pretend that standard time doesn't exist anymore. So hopefully I don't feel completely out of sync for 4 months out of the year anymore. We'll see if I can trick my brain. But on that note, we are out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Thank you so much to the 533 people that were hanging out with us tonight.
Awesome. Good night, everyone.
I always like to tell Aggie at the end so I can watch her turn, or I can visualize her turning purple because she won't turn the camera on.